Welcome to Echoes of My Imagination. My name is Tracy Lee. Sit back, relax, let me tell you a story. Today's story is called The Jar of Living Fire. Deep underground, jars of black liquid burn with impossible blue fire. Spider-limbed bronze guardians stir to life, and the buried hall pulses like a heartbeat older than time itself. Its power seeps into the world above, through myths, whispers, and flickers of flame, awakening anyone curious enough to feel Tartarius stirring again. Let's get into it. The chamber smelled of earth and stone, damp and deep, older than any voice dared name. The walls were carved from black basalt, etched with lines that hummed when the torchlight flickered. Shadows stretched like fingers across the floor, reaching toward the center where the jar waited. It was massive. Not clay, not metal, but something in between, black as night and impossibly smooth. A seal ran around its lip, engraved with jagged symbols no tongue could read. The air around it shimmered with heat, subtle and pulsing, like the heartbeat of a creature long asleep. No one had touched it in centuries. No one had whispered to it, sung to it, or dared break the seal. Yet the jar knew. It waited. A hand reached forward, hesitant, brushing the smooth surface. The seal cracked, a hiss escaped, and the liquid inside stirred, black as pitch, thick yet flowing. It shivered under its own anticipation. Then, with a whisper of flame, it ignited. A fire blue as glacier ice, curling and dancing above the lip, defying gravity, refusing to be drowned by the smallest puddle that had seeped across the stone floor. The chamber shifted with the flame, as if the jar breathed. Dust rose in slow clouds, and the carved glyphs caught the firelight, revealing shapes that had been hidden. Spider-limbed guardians crouched in the corners, bronze and bronze black, frozen mid-step, watching, waiting. The fire licked upward, sending sparks that hovered in the air, refusing to fall. Heat radiated without smoke, and the shadows deepened into a living weave of black and blue. The jar vibrated gently under the hand, a subtle pulse that felt like thought, like attention, like intent. A whisper sounded in the mind, not words, but a knowing. The liquid sought a purpose. It sought the guardians. It sought the hall. The pulse grew stronger, and the guardians twitched, joints creaking as if awakening from centuries of stillness. Their eyes glimmered, small pinprick lights that reflected the fire. They stirred, tentative, cautious, yet inevitable, like tides obeying the pull of the moon. The first guardian stepped forward, careful, deliberate. The sound was soft, almost respectful, but it carried weight. The weight of things meant to exist before man's counting, before memory, before the sky was named. Its legs, too many to be precise, traced lines on the floor that had been waiting for this moment, lines that connected every jar, every seal, every hidden flame across the chamber. The blue fire danced higher, spilling over the edges, but it did not burn stone, did not consume. It breathed life into the bronze limbs. It hummed in resonance with the jar, with the hall, with the earth beneath the feet. In that pulse, the guardians moved with purpose, and the jar's black heart shivered into light. Outside, the wind whispered through cracks in ancient walls, but it could not touch the flame. Rain could not quench it. Water pooled beneath the jar, but the fire floated above it, burning as though the world itself was soaked in electricity, and in that moment, everything felt alive. The stones, the liquid, the bronze, the air. It was just a beginning, not the end, not a warning, not a message, just a stirring. The jar of living fire had awakened, and whatever stories were to come would be carried by its light, deep in the earth, beyond reach, beyond time, waiting for those who dare to see. Chapter 2. The Spider Sentinels. The chamber had changed. Where before there was stillness, there was now motion. Shadows no longer lay in corners, but shifted across walls and floors, bending toward the flame that pulsed like a living heart. From the edges of the hall, the first spider-limbed guardian flexed its joints. Bronze clicked against bronze in a rhythm that was neither clumsy nor accidental. It moved like a tide, careful and deliberate, legs tracing runes invisible to the human eye. The blue fire from the jar shivered as if sensing each step, a heartbeat that was synchronized with the guardian's pulse. It was not just heat or light. It was thought, focus, attention. The jar fed them, spoke to them in a language of shimmer and vibration, and the guardians obeyed. Each sentinel had 8 limbs, or sometimes more. Their joints articulated with uncanny precision. They resembled spiders, yes, but also the limbs of unknown creatures, intricate and impossible. Their bodies were bronze black, etched with runes and symbols, some forming concentric patterns that spiraled like ancient galaxies. They could scale walls, leap across stone, move silently, or erupt into the hall with a fluid, almost insectile grace. One guardian paused near the jar, tilting its head as if sensing the hand that had broken the seal. The liquid shivered, and the flame flickered in reply, stretching toward the sentinel. Tiny sparks jumped from the fire to the guardian's legs, but they did not burn metal. Instead, they imbued it with movement, a living rhythm that had waited for centuries. Then another stirred, and another. Soon, all the sentinels that had crouched like statues in the corners now advanced, flowing across the floor and up the walls in a slow, deliberate dance. Each footstep hummed in resonance with the stone beneath, tracing patterns that had been etched long before human counting. The blue fire leapt higher, trailing arcs of energy that reflected in the polished surfaces of the bronze limbs. Sparks hovered midair, forming a lattice of light that crisscrossed the chamber like a web. And in that web, the guardians moved with purpose, not malice, not obedience, not play, but the rhythm of something that had existed before kingdoms, before cities, before history had names. From above, the ceiling shifted imperceptibly. Carved stone shifted like scales of a living beast. The glyphs seemed to pulse, responding to the guardian's movement. The fire rippled, and the sentinel closest to the jar paused, its many eyes reflecting the light, scanning the hall, scanning the walls, scanning the unseen patterns of the chamber. And then the first whisper came, not in words, not in language, but in vibration. The guardians heard it. The jar hummed. The floor thrummed. The sentinel lowered itself, spreading its limbs across the ground, as if sensing a command from the black liquid itself. Then, all at once, they moved in unison, tracing arcs and spirals across the hall that had been hidden for centuries. The fire's light bent along these paths, revealing carved channels and hidden depressions, making the lines of an unseen map. It was no longer just a jar in a chamber. It was a heartbeat, a network, a living pattern of fire and bronze, and the guardians, the spidered limbed sentinels, were its arms, its legs, and its watchful eyes. They were not hostile. They were not alive in any human sense. They were the echo of thought, the manifestation of a will older than kingdoms, older than walls, older than time. And in the deep stillness that followed, the chamber waited for what would come next, for the ritual to unfold, for the story to continue. The guardians had awakened, the fire had spoken, and the heart beneath the stone beat steadily, silently, and endlessly. Chapter 3. The Buried Hall. The stairway into the earth smelled of stone and dust, damp and ancient, carrying the weight of centuries. Each step echoed, a slow, hollow drum that shook through the bones. The walls pressed close, carved black basalt that held the faint warmth of unseen fires. Along the edges, grooves cut long ago collected water, reflecting flickers from the torch in shallow pools. Each reflection shimmered, catching on jagged edges like the pulse of the world itself. The hall opened slowly, almost reluctantly, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. Pillars rose from the floor, tall and impossibly narrow, etched with glyphs that spiraled upwards in patterns older than kings or empires. Heat radiated from them, not hot, not painful, but deep and alive. The blue fire from the jar outside seemed to reach through the walls, and the stone responded with a faint hum that vibrated through the floor. Along the walls, niches held jars of all sizes. Some were small, cupped like hands. Others towered nearly to the ceiling. Their surfaces were dark, almost black, polished to a mirror finish, and each one bore a seal, cracked slightly, lines curling outward like frozen flames. The liquid inside stirred faintly, shadows moving in rhythm with the pulse of the hall. In the corners crouched the guardians, spider-limbed, bronze-black, jointed with impossible precision. Their eyes glimmered faintly, reflecting the light from unseen sources, tracking every movement. They were waiting, patient, silent, every leg poised, every joint tight with anticipation. Even in stillness, they seemed aware, alive to the heartbeat of the chamber. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of stone, dust, and something faintly metallic. Sweat beaded along skin as heat pooled in pockets, here in the shadow, there near a jar, rising off the walls. Tiny currents of warmth curled around the torchlight, carrying whispers of movement, a subtle vibration in the floor, a shiver in the pillars, a faint hiss from the jars. The carvings along the walls were alive in another way. Patterns wound across the stone, arcs and spirals forming channels that the eye only caught in flashes. They led from jar to niches, to the central chamber where a single massive vessel waited. It was older than the others, sealed with multiple rings of bronze and etched with symbols that hummed with a resonance that pulled at the chest. The guardians moved with the pulse of the hall. One climbed a pillar, tracing a groove with the tip of a leg. Another crouched low, shifting a massive jar just slightly, tilting it so the liquid shimmered in a shaft of unseen light. Heat flared as though the chamber itself breathed, and the blue fire from the jar outside seemed to thicken, stretching through cracks in the stone to meet the guardians. Every surface glowed faintly with heat, catching the edges of carved channels. The air shimmered where the fire's pulse met the stone, a living rhythm that ran from jar to jar, guardian to guardian, pillar to ceiling. And that's it for today. Thank you for joining me for Echoes of My Imagination. My name is Tracy Lee. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and follow, and join me next time for the continuation of this story.